and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and we're very glad you're joining us again today. Today we're going to have another very interesting show. We have with us the author of this book, The Heart of Love, Dr. John Demartini, who is also a major contributor to this book and the very well-known DVD, The Secret. John has been on a path of learning and teaching for well over 25 years around the world. He has written more than 40 books, actually much in excess of that, but it's too much to actually say. And he's well known for the processes, the teachings that he has been coming forth with. He is a philosopher. He is a wisdom teacher in so many ways. He has something called the breakthrough process, which has been helping people internationally get to another level of themselves, to reach down deep into themselves, and actually to help them manifest most consciously the law of attraction, to make their lives into something really, really vibrant, worthwhile, meaningful, and happy. So we're very glad to have John on the show today because he's done so much for so many people, and he's a lovely guy, and it's really a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. How is it that you kind of came to doing what you're doing at this current point? I mean, you used to be a surfer living under a park bench or something like that in California. What was it that turned the tide, if you will?
Well, it's true. I was in the 60s. I lived kind of on the streets. And
Was it comfortable?
Well, it had its pains and pleasures. There was some fun.
Like everything else.
Yeah, there's pains
right?
and pleasures. But I ended up living in Hawaii. I was there to surf. I dreamed about being a surfer, big wave rider on the North Shore. So I made it to the North Shore.
Yeah.
And I lived under the Sunset Bridge. And then finally I was social climbing and moved to a park bench. And then social climbed again into the park bathrooms to get dry. And then finally I got me a little tent and a grass house. And I did really well social climbing until that point, and then I ended up having strychnine poisoning, almost dying. And it was shortly after that that I was led to a yoga class where I met Paul C. Bragg. And Paul Bragg, you would know, I'm sure, from Bragg's amino acids.
Sure.
Gary Null was a byproduct, and Jack LaLanne was a byproduct.
Did he also was he involved also in water?
Water.
Very much so.
Now, I just had dinner the other night in Honolulu with his daughter, who we don't know her age, but it's somewhere in the 90s. And she is the most vibrant lady you've ever met, amazing lady. Her name is Patricia Bragg. But anyway, it was Paul Bragg who, in 1972, November 18th, I believe, it was the opportunity I had to meet with him.
Around Sagittarian time.
Around Sagittarian time. I had the opportunity to meet with this gentleman and listen to him lecture. And he's the one that introduced me to The Secret. And he's the one that said that we have a body, we have a mind, and we have a soul. And when the body is guided by the mind and the mind is guided by the soul, we have maximum potential. And he talked about the power of visualization, the power of thinking, the power of what we say to ourselves. And he's the one that gave me my first affirmation that I took consciously. And that was, I am a genius and I apply my wisdom. Up until that point, I'd never read a book. I had dropped out of school.
You had never read a book?
I'd never read a book till I was 17. I had dropped out of school. I had learning difficulties when I was a child, and that's why I went into sports and lived on the streets. And it was he that inspired me to believe in the possibility that I could do something amazing with my life. And from that day on, which is 34 years plus ago, I've been focused on what I'm doing, and I wanted, that night I dreamed about being a teacher, healer, and philosopher, and traveling the world and doing something like this that a gentleman had done and inspire people. So I've been blessed now for 34 years plus to do it.
Yes, to do that. We've been blessed from the beginning to even meet him and go through what you had to go through, the social climbing, etc., to get to the point of being able to hear what he had to say.
Well, I think he was so present and he was so certain and so loving about what he did that anybody in that room was affected by it. I mean, he had us go through a guided imagery experience that when we came out of it, I looked around the room and everybody was in tears. And I looked up at him at the front of the room. He was sitting with his hands on his knees and his head was up and his eyes were closed, and you could almost read his mind. It was like he was saying, thank you, God for revealing to these young souls their destiny. And it was a true inspiration, epiphany, I guess you could describe it as.
Yes.
I saw a vision of me speaking to 1 million people. And today, I've been blessed to speak to 1.5 billion people now in the last decade.
1.5 billion?